A host at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Pasadena looks a man up and down and tells him he cannot afford to eat there. Not because of anything he said, not because of anything he ordered, because of what he was wearing. A gray hoodie gone soft at the cuffs, faded jeans, scuffed motorcycle boots that had clearly seen a lot of road. The owner watched it happen from across the room and did nothing to stop it. He decided, in the space of one glance, that the quiet man near the door did not belong in his dining room. The man did not argue. He nodded once, thanked the host by name, and stepped back out into the evening without raising his voice. 19 minutes later, he came back, and what happened next left a room full of people who thought they knew exactly who mattered, sitting in complete silence. There is a restaurant on Green Street in Pasadena, California, called Solein. If you have never heard of it, that is by design. It does not advertise. It does not take walk-ins after 7. The kind of people who eat there do not find it. They are already expected. Solein has 11 tables, not 12. 11, because the owner believed that scarcity was the whole point, that a room should always feel like it was withholding something from most of the world. The tablecloths were pressed without a single crease. The water glasses were hand-blown, faintly green at the base, heavy enough that you noticed the weight every time you lifted one. There was a jazz trio some nights, tucked into a corner behind a folding screen, playing softly enough that you had to stop talking to hear them. Which was the point of that, too. Dinner started at $240 a person. Before wine. The wine list ran 40 pages and opened at $90 a bottle and did not slow down from there. The waiting list ran, on a good month, 6 weeks deep. There were judges on that list. A retired senator. 2 people whose faces you would recognize from movies you have loved for 30 years. The people who ate at Solein came for the food, but they stayed loyal for something else. They stayed because of how the room made them feel. Chosen. Sealed off. Safe from the ordinary world outside the glass, where people wore hoodies and drove trucks and worried about the check. And into that world, on a warm Thursday in October, a man in a gray hoodie parked a motorcycle at the curb. He was not a large man, and he did not move like someone who wanted to be seen. He pulled off his helmet, ran a hand through his hair, and looked up at the quiet gold light behind the restaurant windows, the way you look at something you have been meaning to try for a while. He had 2 friends with him, a married couple, older, dressed no better than he was. They had ridden up from Long Beach. It was the wife's birthday. She had read about the place in a magazine years ago and never forgotten the name. The man's name was Marcus Rourke. If you followed movies at all in the last 20 years, you knew the face. He had spent 2 decades playing the same kind of character, the quiet one. The one who did the right thing at the worst possible cost to himself. The one who never raised his voice until the very end. In real life, he was known for almost nothing except being decent. He gave money away and asked that his name be left off it. He rode the subway. He had more than once been photographed sitting alone on a curb eating a sandwich, and the photographs always went the same quiet way around the internet. And people always said the same thing. That's just who he is. He was wearing the hoodie because it was comfortable, and because it was his, and because it had never once occurred to him to dress for a room's approval. He held the door for his friends and stepped inside. The man who owned Solein was named Victor Halloran, and to understand what he did that night, you have to understand where he came from, because he did not start out cruel. Almost no one does. At 58, Victor was a specific kind of impressive. Silver hair kept short. A suit that fit the way a suit fits only when it has been made for one body. He wore a watch that cost more than most cars, and he never mentioned it, and he never needed to, because the people he wanted to impress already knew what it was. He moved through his own dining room like a man walking through a house he had built with his hands, which, in a sense, he had. But Victor Halloran grew up in a second-floor apartment above a dry cleaner in the flat, hot part of the San Gabriel Valley, and the smell of chemical steam was the smell of his entire childhood. His father pressed other people's shirts for 31 years. His mother took the bus to Arcadia and San Marino to clean houses in neighborhoods where a boy like Victor was assumed to be lost if he was seen walking down the street. He remembered one afternoon better than he remembered most of his own wedding. He was 9. His mother had brought him along to a house she cleaned, a big white house with a pool nobody swam in, and the woman who owned it had looked at Victor standing in her marble entryway in his hand-me-down sneakers and said to his mother, not unkindly, "He can wait outside. I don't want him touching anything." Victor spent the next 50 years making sure that no one would ever again decide, with one glance, what he was allowed to touch. He got out. He worked in kitchens from the age of 15, washing dishes, then prepping, then cooking, then running rooms. He learned that the world he had been locked out of had a door, and that the key to the door was money, and that money was a language you could learn if you were willing to give it every hour you had. He gave it every hour. He built Soline from a failed bistro and a second mortgage, and he built it to be exactly the kind of room he had once been told to wait outside of. He told himself he was building something beautiful. And he was. That was the part that made it complicated. But somewhere in the building of it, the boy who had been told to wait outside had curdled into a man who did the telling. Victor had convinced himself that the velvet rope was not cruelty. It was standards. It was the thing that made the room worth being inside. And every time he turned someone away, some part of him that had never healed felt, for just a moment, like it was finally safe. So when he looked up from the reservation book that Thursday and saw a man in a worn gray hoodie holding the door for 2 people in windbreakers, Victor Halloran did not see Marcus Rourke. He did not see a beloved man. He did not see a customer at all. He saw his own childhood walk through the door in cheap sneakers. And every old wound in him decided, quietly and completely, that this could not be allowed to sit down. He did not go over himself. He never did. He caught the eye of the young host near the podium, a 24-year-old named Nora who had worked there 8 months and needed the job the way you need a job, when your mother's medication is not optional. And he tilted his head, the small gesture he used, and Nora came over. And Victor said it low. The 3 by the door, hoodie and the windbreakers. He straightened a fork on the nearest table that did not need straightening. Tell them we're fully committed tonight, be gracious, but they're not staying. Nora looked at the table, then at Victor. Mr. Halloran, the 7:30 for 8, canceled. We have, Nora? He smiled at her, and the smile did not reach anything. Be gracious. Nora walked over with a laminated smile and a stone in her stomach. Good evening, she said. Do you have a reservation with us tonight? We don't, Marcus said. His voice was easy. We were hoping we might have gotten lucky. It's her birthday. He nodded at the woman beside him, who lit up a little at being included. Happy birthday, Nora said, and meant it, which made the next part worse. I'm so sorry. We're fully committed this evening. Marcus glanced, without meaning anything by it, at the 2 open tables near the window. Nora watched him see them. She watched him understand. He looked back at her. And here is the thing she would think about for a long time afterward. He did not look angry. He looked at her the way you look at someone you can tell is being made to do a thing they do not believe in. How come? He asked. Not sharp, just curious, just quiet. Nora's mouth opened. Nothing good was going to come out of it, so she said the true thing instead. Badly, it's the dress code. It's a jacket's preferred room, I'm sorry. It's not. She stopped. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked down at his own hoodie as if seeing it for the first time. Then back up at her, and something in his face was almost gentle. It's okay, he said. It's not your fault. You're doing your job. He turned to his friends. Come on, he said. I know a place. Better pie anyway. The woman whose birthday it was said, Marcus, we don't have to, and he said, we really do, and he was already smiling, already moving, already turning the whole thing into no big deal for her sake. He held the door for them on the way out the same way he had held it on the way in. But at the threshold he stopped, and he looked back at Nora, and he said one more thing. You're better than this room, he told her. Don't stay in it too long. Then the door closed, and the gold light of Solene went on glowing over its 11 perfect tables as if nothing had happened at all. Out on the sidewalk, Marcus told his friends to give him 1 minute. He stepped a few feet away, turned his back so they could not hear, and pulled out his phone. He made one call. He spoke for less than 2 minutes. Whatever he said it quietly, and he was smiling faintly by the end of it. And then he put the phone back in his pocket and said, Okay, pie. They did not get pie right away. They walked half a block to the truck the couple had left in a lot, and they sat on a low brick wall in the warm October dark, and Marcus told a story that made the birthday woman laugh so hard she had to hold her husband's arm. He was, by every account, completely at ease. He had absorbed the whole thing and set it down somewhere, and did not appear to be carrying it at all. 19 minutes after the door of Solene closed behind him, a car pulled up to the curb outside the restaurant. Not a flashy car, a clean, dark, expensive, quiet car, the kind that does not need to announce anything. A woman got out. Her name was August Reyes, and inside Solene her name was something close to scripture. She was 66 years old, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that had cost more than the restaurant's monthly rent, and she was, by a wide margin, the single most important person who could possibly walk through Victor Holleran's door. August Reyes had spent 40 years building and buying restaurant groups across 3 states. She sat on the board of the culinary foundation that decided which chefs got the grants that made careers. She had, quietly, been considering Solene for exactly the kind of investment that would let Victor open the second location he had been dreaming about for 6 years. He had been courting her for 8 months. He had a folder in his office with her name on it. She walked in, and Victor came across the room so fast he nearly upset a wine bucket, and his whole face was open in a way it never was for anyone. August, he said. My God. I had no idea you were. I would have held thee. You didn't know I was coming, she agreed pleasantly. I didn't either until about 20 minutes ago. She let him take her coat. She looked around the room with the practiced eye of a person who had appraised 1,000 rooms. It's lovely, Victor. It really is. It's exactly what you told me it would be. Let me get you the corner table, in a moment. She smiled. I'm actually waiting on someone. He asked me to meet him here. Said it was important. She glanced toward the door. You'll know him, I think. Marcus Rourke. You know Marcus? Victor said the name back to her like a man repeating a word in a language he was just now realizing he did not speak. Marcus Rourke. Old friend, August said warmly. One of the best men I know, and I don't say that about many. 20 years I've known him. He called me half an hour ago and asked if I'd come have dinner with him at a place he'd just discovered. She looked toward the window, toward the dark street, and then the door opened. and Marcus Rourke walked back into Celine in the same gray hoodie, the same faded jeans, the same scuffed motorcycle boots, and stood next to August Reyes as if he had never left. The room, which had not been watching before, was watching now. Victor Halloran's face did a number of things very quickly, and then settled on the thing men settle on when pride arrives before their brain has finished the math. He could have fixed it in one sentence. Everyone in the room could feel the door standing open for him. He could have said, "Mr. Rourke, I owe you an apology. Please, both of you, sit down." It would have cost him nothing but a small private swallow of shame, and August Reyes would very likely have admired him for it, because that is how she had built a 40-year career, by watching how people behaved in exactly this kind of moment. But Victor did not see a door standing open. He saw the boy in the marble entryway. He saw the woman saying he can wait outside, and some animal part of him decided it would rather burn the whole room down than be seen backing away from a man in a hoodie. "August," he said, and his voice was smooth, and it was pitched just loud enough for the tables to hear, "I would be honored to have you at my table. Truly, but I should tell you, in fairness, I already explained to Mr. Rourke earlier this evening that we do keep a certain standard here regarding attire, and I'm afraid that hasn't changed." The trio behind the screen had stopped between songs. Nobody had told them to. The room had simply gone quiet, and quiet is contagious. August Reyes looked at Victor for a long moment. Then she looked at the two open tables by the window, the same two tables Nora had not been allowed to seat, and something in her face closed like a ledger. "I see," she said. At a table near the wall, an older woman in a green dress set down her fork. She had white hair and the kind of straight-backed presence that made waiters check their posture, and she had been coming to Celine since the month it opened. She said, into the silence, in a clear and unhurried voice, "Victor, that's Marcus Rourke. He funded the Children's Hospital wing in Duarte. My grandson had his surgery there." She let that sit. "You're going to turn him away over a sweatshirt?" Somewhere in the room, a phone came up. Then another, and Victor Halloran, who had spent 50 years making sure no one would ever again decide with one glance what he was allowed to be, stood in the middle of the beautiful room he had built, and felt it turn, table by table, against him. Marcus had not raised his voice. He had not moved. He had simply walked back in and stood there, in his ordinary clothes, and let the room do the arithmetic he had known it would do. Now he stepped forward, one step, and he asked Victor a single question. It was not loud. It was not a speech. It was the quietest thing said in that room all night. "If I weren't Marcus Rourke," he said, "if I were just some guy who rode up on a bike in a hoodie for his friend's birthday, would you have turned that guy away too?" Victor Halloran opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Marcus watched him for a moment. Then something in his own face changed, not into triumph, which is what the room might have expected, but into something closer to recognition. He had seen that particular silence before. He knew what lived underneath it. "Where's your office?" he asked. Quietly, just for Victor. Victor blinked. "What?" "Your office. You have one back there?" Marcus tilted his head toward the hallway past the kitchen. "Let's you and me talk for a second, not out here." He turned to August. 2 minutes. Order the thing you always tell me about. The lamb." August Reyes, who had watched a great many men fail this exact test, looked at Marcus with something that was almost tenderness, because she had also, a few times, watched one pass it. "Take your time," she said. The office was small. It was at the end of a narrow hallway that smelled of garlic and dish soap and old paper, and it had a metal desk and a window that looked out on the alley and a single framed photograph on the wall that Marcus noticed the second he walked in. Victor sat down heavily in the chair behind the desk. His hands were not entirely steady. He looked, suddenly, much older than he had looked in the dining room. Marcus sat down across from him, in the plain chair, in the hoodie, and he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and the first thing he said undid every defense Victor had left. "I didn't come back here to ruin your night." Victor stared at him. "I mean it," Marcus said. "I could have just gone and gotten pie. I almost did, but I stood on that sidewalk, and I couldn't stop thinking. A guy doesn't build a room like this, doesn't sweat every fork and every flower and every note the trio plays, and then throw people out for fun. That's not a guy who doesn't care. That's a guy who cares about something so hard it's got a hook in him." He nodded. "Once. So, what's the hook, Victor?" And for reasons Victor Halloran would never fully be able to explain, he told him. He told him about the apartment over the dry cleaner, the chemical steam, his father's 31 years of pressing other men's collars, his mother on the bus to San Marino, and he told him about the White House and the pool nobody swam in, and the woman who had looked at a 9-year-old boy in hand-me-down sneakers and said, "He can wait outside, I don't want him touching anything," and how his mother had said nothing because she needed the work, and how he had watched his mother say nothing, and how he had decided that day, at 9 years old, that he would build something so fine that no one would ever be allowed to look at him like that again. "And I did," Victor said, and his voice broke on it. "I built it. And I turn people away, and I tell myself it's about standards, and the truth is," he stopped. He looked at his own hands. "The truth is, it's the only time I don't feel like that kid on that marble floor." Marcus did not interrupt. He did not rush to fix it. He listened the way you listen to someone you have decided deserves to be heard all the way to the end. Then he said something of his own. Not a lecture, just true. "I know what it's like to think you're not enough," Marcus said. "There were years I lost people I couldn't afford to lose. Years the work dried up and I sat in an empty apartment wondering if any of it had meant anything, or if I'd just been pretending the whole time and everybody was about to find out." He turned his hands over. "You spend enough time scared of being the kid on the floor, you'll build a whole life just to keep from feeling it. I get it. I'm not here to tell you that you're a bad man." He let a beat pass. Then he asked the question he had come to ask. "That young woman out there, Nora, the one you sent to do the thing you didn't want your own name on." Marcus's voice stayed gentle, which somehow made it land harder. "You know she's got a sick mother? You know what a knight in your book means to a kid like that?" He didn't wait for an answer. "How do you think she felt, walking over to tell 3 strangers they weren't good enough? You made her be the woman in the marble house, Victor. You put your worst night on her." Victor closed his eyes. The office was very quiet. Down the hall, faintly, the trio had started playing again. "I'm not asking you for a free meal," Marcus said, standing. "I'm not asking you to grovel. August out there, she can make or break you, and we both know it, and I'm not going to say a word to her either way. This isn't about that." He put his hand on the door. "I'm just asking you to walk back out there and be the guy who built this place because he thought a room could make people feel like they mattered, not the guy who uses it to make sure they don't." He almost smiled. "You've got about 100 people out there who'd love to watch you do it." Then he left and shut the door softly behind him and let Victor Halloran sit alone with the version of himself he had been avoiding for 50 years. For a long time, later, people who were there would disagree on exactly how long. Some said 2 minutes. Some said 5. Nothing happened. Then, the office door opened. Victor Halloran walked back into his own dining room, and he had washed his face, and his eyes were red, and his hands were still not entirely steady, and he did not go to August Reyes, which is what everyone expected. He crossed the room instead to the small figure by the podium. He stopped in front of Nora, and in front of the whole silent room, he said, "I owe you an apology first. I put something on you tonight that was mine to carry, and I made you carry it. That was wrong. I'm sorry. And if you'll still have the job after the way I've behaved, I'd be grateful, because you're the best host this room has ever had, and I've been too small to tell you." Nora's eyes filled. She did the thing you do. She blinked hard and pretended they hadn't. Then Victor turned to Marcus. "Mr. Rourke," he said. And his voice was steady now in the way a voice gets steady when a man has finally stopped fighting himself. "I owe you an apology too. Not because you're famous. Not because of who you brought with you. Because what I did was wrong, and I knew it was wrong while I was doing it, and I did it anyway. There are 2 open tables by that window. I'd be honored if you and your friends would take one. On the house isn't the point, and I know you'd say no to it, so full price, and the best of everything I've got, and my apology with every course." Marcus looked at him, and then he gave Victor the smile. The real one, the warm one, slightly crooked. The one that showed up in exactly none of his movie posters and all of his best moments. "That's all I needed to hear," he said. Somewhere near the back, the woman in the green dress began to clap. Her husband joined her. Then the table beside them. And then, without anyone leading it, and without anyone deciding to, the whole room of people who had come to Soline to feel separate from the world was, for a moment, entirely together in it, applauding a man in a hoodie and the man who had almost thrown him out. Marcus went and got his friends from the sidewalk. The birthday woman cried a little when she saw the table by the window with the candle already lit. They ate the lamb. August Reyes joined them for dessert and told stories that made all 4 of them laugh. And Victor Halloran cooked the best meal of his life for a table he had tried to turn away, and when the check came, Marcus paid every dollar of it and left a tip that made the whole staff quiet, and he shook Victor's hand at the door. Then he held the door for his friends the way he had the first time, and he stepped out into the ordinary night, and he was gone before most of the room understood that the best part of the evening had already left. He never saw what happened next. That was the thing about Marcus. He was always gone before the credit arrived. Here is the part the story does not usually tell you, because it is the slow part, and the slow part is the true part. It did not get better right away. It got worse first. Someone in the dining room had filmed the confrontation, and by Saturday it was everywhere. And for about 10 days, Soline was the most famous restaurant in America for the worst possible reason. Reservations canceled. A food writer ran a piece with the headline, "The Room That Told You to Wait Outside." Victor sat in his dark kitchen at 2 in the morning more than one night that week with the folder that had August Reyes's name on it. And he thought seriously about selling the place and starting over somewhere no one had seen the video. His sister, who was the only person in the world he had never been able to lie to, told him the hard thing over the phone. "You can sell it and run," she said. "That's the easy one, Vic. Or you can stay and be different in the exact place everybody watched you be awful. One of those changes you. The other one just moves you." He stayed, and then, slowly, in specific ways, Victor Halloran became a different man in the same room. The first change came the following month. On the first Monday of every month, the one night Soline was traditionally closed, Victor started opening the doors. Not a soup kitchen, not paper plates and a simplified menu. The full room, the same chefs, the same hand-blown glasses, the same heavy silverware, the same trio behind the screen. He opened it to families from the neighborhoods his mother used to clean, to the kids who got told to wait outside, and he seated them at the good tables by the window, and he cooked them the lamb. The second change he made was quieter, and he told almost no one about it. He found the woman who owned the White House with the pool, or rather her daughter, because the woman herself had passed years before. And Victor wrote her a letter, not to accuse, just to tell her a thing had happened when he was 9, and that he had spent his whole life letting it run him, and that he was finally putting it down. And Nora, who had needed the job the way you need a job, stayed for 2 more years, while Victor quietly paid for a management program at the community college. And then she left, the way Marcus had told her to, and she opened a small breakfast place of her own on the east side of town. It has 9 tables. There is a sign by the door, hand-painted, that she made herself. It says, "Every guest is a regular. Everybody eats the same." On the first Monday of every month, she closes to the public and opens the doors to whoever needs a warm room, which is a thing she learned, she will tell you, from the worst boss and the best night she ever had. 3 years later, a magazine ran a profile of Victor Halloran and the unlikely second life of Soline. Near the end, the writer asked him about the night with the video. Victor was quiet for a while. Then, he said the thing they used for the headline. "A man in a hoodie sat me down," he said, "and asked me a question I'd been running from since I was 9 years old. He didn't ruin me. He gave me my room back." Marcus Rourke was asked about it once, at a junket for some film, when a reporter brought up the video. He looked, by all accounts, genuinely puzzled for a second, as if he had to reach back for it. Then he shrugged, and he said the only thing he ever said about it. "He was always the guy who built that room," Marcus said. "He just forgot for a night. Most of us do." And then he moved on to the next question, because he was, as ever, already gone before the credit arrived. I have told a lot of stories on this channel, but I keep coming back to this one, and I have thought for a long time about why, and I don't think it's the part everybody remembers, the room turning, the applause, the owner apologizing in front of everyone. That part is satisfying, sure. That's the part we click for. But the part I actually keep is the small office. The part where a man who had every right to win chose instead to sit down across from the person who had wronged him and ask, "What's the hook?" He didn't come back to that restaurant to be proven right. He came back to give a man a door he'd stopped being able to find on his own. And I don't know if I'd have done that. I'd like to think I would. I'd like to think that if someone looked me up and down and decided I didn't belong, I'd have the grace to turn around and try to understand the wound underneath it, instead of just wanting to be right. But honestly, I'm not sure. Most of us aren't sure. And maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe the point isn't that we'd all be Marcus. Maybe the point is that any one of us, on the wrong night, is one old wound away from being Victor, and what we could use on that night is somebody kind enough to notice and brave enough to knock. This story is fictional, inspired by the kind of quiet decency the best people are known for, and by every real person who has ever chosen understanding when they had every excuse not to. If it meant something to you, do me a favor and leave a comment. Not great video, but tell me the moment you'd want to be brave enough to knock on that door. I read them. They're the best part of doing this. And if you know someone who's been made to feel like they had to wait outside, or someone who's forgotten they were ever the person who built the room, share this with them. It might be the exact thing they need to hear tonight. If you're new here, subscribe. There's another story coming, and I think you'll want to be in the room for it. See you in the next one.